Hey, okay, well, this isn't so much a response video to a video that Lady Locks put out recently, but it's more that certain things came up in it that I found interesting and have some opinions on, basically. So I thought, rather than leaving an essay in the comment section, basically, that I would do a video of my own about it, and this is that video. So I've got some notes here, so if you see me look away, that'll be why. And not one for preamble, so let's go. Okay, so the first thing is picking direction. Then for myself, I pick quite intuitively. So I let the lock dictate how I pick it, essentially, which may or may not be the best way of doing it. If I'm in the middle of a lock, say, and I set something, I'll often go back to the start rather than going to the end, or vice versa. And 9 times out of 10, though, I will start at the front. I'm not sure why that is. It doesn't always work out that way. For the American A1100 that I picked recently, it was best to start at the back, towards the middle of the back. So it can be a thing, but maybe it would help if I picked in a more orderly fashion. I don't know, but I don't, and that's that. I may change that in the future, but that's how I do it for now. Okay, the second thing is binding order. Now, I don't really pay a lot of attention to binding order because I find it can be quite deceptive. With the ABUS lock that I've been working on recently, for example, I think it's a 540 silver lock. It's quite common with ABUSes. I mean, they're known for this, for making you drop a lot of pins. It's like a frickin' yo-yo in there half the time. And yeah, so there's that aspect to ABUS locks. But then if you set one and another one drops, certainly speaking for myself, I would forget the binding order if that was me, because it gets complicated. If you set one, another one drops, set another one drops, then you're all over the place with the binding order anyway. The points that Lady Locks made in her video are valid, of course, but in some instances they can be helpful, possibly, but I don't think like that. I struggle to even find pins sometimes, leave alone know what order they're in. So I think, yeah, it speaks to the more intuitive style that I've got, really. So yes, I don't worry too much about binding order. The one spot in which I think it might matter a little bit, is if you know a lock has got something specific about it. Like, for example, the Master Lock 410 Lotto. I think it's pin 5 is usually either serrated or maybe even a standard pin, I'm not sure. And the rest of them are spools. So knowing that would be important, because obviously you'd want to deal with the different pin first, perhaps, if it binds first, I guess. But you'd want to be aware that that was there and where it was. So in that sense, I can see that it might help a little bit. Okay, the third issue that Lady Lock's covered in her video that I wanted to talk about is key bitting. Now, I'm in two minds about key bitting. I mean, it can be helpful, yes, if you've got something very specific, like an obscenely shallow or deep pin, and you know, you've looked at the key and seen that there's a deep one on there, but even then, it can be misleading sometimes. Sometimes things can't be, you know, aren't as deep or as high as they look. So, or as shallow as they look, rather. And, but yeah, I think though, if you rely on key bitting, then it's not very realistic, because obviously if you're a locksmith, for example, you may never see the key to the locks that you work on for people, for example. If you're trying to get into somebody's house because they've left the key in there, you're not going to see the key because they haven't got it on them, and that's why you're there trying to get the door open. So there's that aspect to it as well. What else have I got in my notes here about that? Oh yes, an important thing. I think it's important, relatively, that if you're dealing with spools or a mixture of different types of pins, the key's not going to tell you that. The only way you're going to know that anyway is by picking it and feeling around for the different types of spools. And given that, you know, the key isn't going to tell you that, how much use would it be to look at the key in that situation? Very little. And a lot of the information you can get from looking at the key anyway, you should be able to detect by feel, I think. You know, with the deeps and the shallows and the boarding and all of that. So, can it be helpful? Yes. Should it be relied upon? Absolutely not. Okay, the fourth issue I want to discuss is progressive pinning. Now, I've never done this. I'm not really comfortable with gutting and reassembly of locks yet, and I'd want to practice that a little bit more before it became routine enough that I would do it to progressively pin a lock to make it easier to learn, potentially. But I can see how it would be handy to practice certain spool combinations, certain pin combinations. So if you had spools and serrated, or spools and gins, or spools and trees, or serrated and trees, or T-pins and something, or trap pins, or piston pins, or something like that, with if it's a mixture of pins, then essentially I can see how it might be advantageous, depending on your learning style and your picking style, to be able to put certain pins in certain places so that you can learn how to pick those specifically. So some people say progressive pinning is cheating. I wouldn't say so, because excuse me. I wouldn't say so because even if you choose what pins are in the lock and where they're placed, it's still you that has to pick them, and you still feel for them, and you still get the learning experience. So I don't think it's cheating necessarily. I think if you do it with every lock that you do, that you pick, it can become a little bit inefficient, because I would imagine it would take a certain amount of time. And also, hopefully, you would be picking up various cues along the way so that you wouldn't need to do it for every lock. That would be ideal, I would imagine. So, cheating, no. Advantageous, possibly. But I don't think it should be done every time because it would end up taking way too long. And if you had to do it, for every lock you picked, you could only pick locks that you could progressively pin. There are lock padlocks, for example, that can't be gutted, so how would you work with that? It would be not necessarily impossible, but difficult if you were relying on progressive pinning. I suppose what you could do is you could get a trainer lock for the model that you're working on. There are some with cutaways so that you can see what's going on and maybe change the pins over and, you know, practice certain things in certain places. But I think it's not ideal, put it that way. I think it would be better to learn through doing it naturally and feeling it rather than progressive pinning it, essentially. Anything else about progressive pinning? I don't think so. Yeah, why I would progressive pin anything? The only reason I would is if it was something entirely new. Like, it would be a balance thing. If progressive pinning is, even though I'm not comfortable with it, if that's easier than learning an entire new type of pin, or more than one absolutely new type of pin, especially if there's counter milling in there as well, then I might do it for that. I don't know though, because I was gonna do progressive pinning for the American A100 that I made a video on recently, and I didn't need to in the end. I found the serrated pins, for me, in my experience, to be easier than spools. I don't know how common that is, but that's why I think that ABUS locks are certainly the ABUSes I've tried have been more challenging for me than the A1100 was, from that perspective. Okay, and finally, full tang picks as opposed to half tang picks. It's dealer's choice, really, I would think. You know, some people are going to like a full tang. Personally, I'd never heard of a half tang pin until Lady Locks mentioned it in the video. It's what you work best with, I would think. It's preference. One's not necessarily going to be worse than the other. It's horses for courses. I mean, some people are going to want a full tang. Some people, I've never tried a half tang pick, for example. I might try it, I might love it, I might swear by it, but either way, it's dependent on the individual. It's all about feel. So it's all about the best way to do it for you, essentially. So if you prefer a half tang, then use a half tang. If you don't, then use a full tang. I certainly don't think that necessarily makes it any easier or harder in a more general sense. I wonder if the half tang is in some ways analogous to the twisted Z wrench, whether it would affect the feedback in some way. But then, yeah, that would be the one thing that I would question. But then I don't know enough about it really to answer that one way or the other. Okay, well, that's everything that Lady Locks brought up. there is one thing I would like to mention myself. From the experience that I've had recently working on the Abus Silver Lock, and that involves time. As with many things in life, you know, it can feel like you're doing things too slowly, or that you're doing something wrong just because it's taking a long time, which isn't necessarily the case. I mean, it's taken me a long time to get my head around how spools work, for example, for whatever reason. I don't really know why that is. It's not particularly difficult. Maybe I just don't think that way. But yeah, so there's no deadline. I mean, it's an individual journey, really, lockpicking. It's because it's done by feel. It's something that nobody can show you, really. I mean, they can describe the mechanics of it, but how you interpret the feedback, how you learn to tension locks, how much tension to use, how to deal with certain pins, certain pin combinations, it's all individual. So the time it takes is part of that. As I say, it's taken me quite a while to learn to pick spool pins, but that's okay. It's an element of pressure that certainly I put on myself, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I would imagine other people do. So I thought I would bring that up at the end. Yeah. So just to finish off then, I would like to thank both Lady Locks and the people on the UK lockpicking site that I'm a member of on Facebook, the UK Lockpicking Coliseum, I think it's called, for all their assistance with learning spools, because it's taken quite an effort on my part, and because I learn quite visually, I suppose it was a hard one to get the grips with, but yeah, so I would like to thank people for their help in doing that. So is there anything else I haven't mentioned that I wanted to? Yes, that linked to the help that I've had. I fell into the trap, really, of picking spools and getting locks open without really knowing consciously how I was doing it. I think, you know, how the spools, I knew it in theory, but in terms of picking it, the tension, the counter rotation, things like that, I wasn't quite conscious of how that worked and what I was doing. So again, thank you everybody that helped with that. I now know what I'm feeling for a little bit more, and that has helped. And the speed has taken care of itself. I've gotten quicker at doing the Abus locks now, and indeed the proposed locks that I've done in the past with spool pins. So is that all? Yes, it is. And with all that being said, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and please like, share, comment and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated, and I will speak to you soon. And again, thank you for watching, and as always, bye for now.